Hey everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 76 of 100 Days of Kane, PA. And tonight is Wednesday night, so you know what that means. It means it's History Night. We're here at the depot with members of the Kane Historic Preservation Society who will share stories with us about Kane's history. And tonight the stories are going to be told by Wendy Oakes. There are some artifacts from the Kane family that she's going to go ahead and share some detail and history and stories that I think you're going to find very, very interesting. So I'm going to not keep you in suspense any longer. I'll go ahead and flip you around and we'll go hear from Wendy. So let's go ahead and walk on in and say hello. Hi, Wendy.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you today?
I'm good.
Hey, thank you so much for having us here tonight. I love Wednesday nights.
You're welcome. We love having you here.
Well, thank you. And what are you going to start with? I know we have a couple artifacts that we're going to cover. So where would you like to begin?
I'd like to begin with this chair. We have this chair that's been on display for a while now, and we received it from one of the Kane family. And it was passed down through the Kane family, and it ended up with Sybil Kane, and she was a great-granddaughter of General Kane. And she lived here all her life, died here in Kane. And when she died, she hadn't been married, so all of her stuff went to Tom Africa, who was a nephew, lived in Warren. And he started giving us pieces of the history. And he brought this chair, and this was before I even started here, and he gave it to the guys, and nobody knew what the chair was. So they put a garbage bag over it and put it in the attic because nobody knew. It was an old chair, but nobody knew the story behind it.
So they knew that.
And Sybil hadn't passed down, the significance of the chair. So I started in 2012, I think, in here, and we started getting more things from him. And there was a box of documents. And right on top of the documents was this paper, and it was a transcription of a conversation the Mormons had had with Sybil. And it talked about this cream-colored chair with gold trim on it. And it started explaining the significance of this chair. And as I'm reading this out loud to the guys' eyes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're like, "We have that chair." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" "We have that chair." They said, "It's up in the attic and it's got garbage bag over it." So they went rushing up to the attic to grab it and bring it down here. And sure enough, it was the same chair that she described.
How amazing.
And this chair is from the Revolutionary War era. And General Kane's great-great-grandfather, John Kane, was in the Revolutionary War, and he was on the side of the rebels. And at some point he changed and he went back to the British side. And so depending on what town you were in, what their loyalties were, when he left, his family, his wife and children would have been kicked out on the street. They would have chased them out of their house and they wouldn't have been able to stay. So General Washington had known the family, and to save the wife and children from anything happening to them, he came and stayed in the house for 3 months.
So General Washington.
General Washington during the Revolutionary War.
As in?
President Washington.
President George Washington.
So this chair is the chair he sat in while he wrote missives to his generals during the war. The family lived upstairs and he stayed downstairs with his aides, and so the chair has huge connections to the Revolutionary War, and it's in Kane.
That's amazing.
It's amazing how many connections. Denny has always taught me from the beginning that the connections are the important part, and we have so many connections to different parts of history in this town.
Right,
it's
so
amazing.
Right here in Kane, in the depot, we have a chair that was sat in by President Washington, and it's from the Revolutionary War times.
Right.
How incredible is that? What a special piece of history.
So it was amazing that we even had this description.
Right.
I mean, to find that description in Sybil's papers was fantastic. Otherwise it would have been an old chair sitting in the attic and we would have never known.
Right. Oh, how cool.
So one of the other artifacts we have from the Kane family is the tea set. We call it the presidential tea set. And it was owned by General Kane's grandmother, Elizabeth Coltis Gray, and we've talked about her at the chapel before, the Gray family and the Grays Ferry Inn. The Grays Ferry Inn was where a lot of the signers of the Constitution went. They worked on the Constitution there. They had the reception for General Washington when he was made the general. So she was there for a lot of history, and this tea set belonged to that family, and it was passed down to Thomas Kane's mother, and then to he and Elizabeth got it. So there was several different presidents that drank out of this tea set. There was Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Polk, Tyler, Van Buren, Buchanan, and the very last one to drink out of it would have been President Grant when he came here to visit General Kane, here in Kane.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of strong leadership from presidents that have...
And I didn't think about this before, but it's very small, but that is a picture of Gray's Ferry Inn.
Oh, neat. Wow. Wow,
So,
that's an old picture.
It is an old picture. This is a framed picture. We didn't talk about this before, but I can mention it real quick. This belonged to Thomas Kane. This was his safe.
Oh, really?
When he traveled. It's a picture, a postcard of Gray's Ferry Inn, which was historically significant to him. So he would go, when he would travel anywhere and stay in a hotel, he would take this with him. And it's a framed photograph, but on the back, when he hung it on the wall, was a place to put his money and his papers that was safe.
How neat.
Huh. So
very clever.
That is very clever, very interesting. So, and nobody would come into the hotel room and they would never know that was there. Well,
traveler's tip.
This, I'll be careful, Kate, not pointing at you. This is General Kane's battle sword. We have two of his swords. We have this one. This is the battle sword. This is what he used in battle. We also have his dress sword, which is still in the case right there. So this sword we got from his great-granddaughter, Carol Simmerly. She lives in Arizona. I think she's about 92 right now. In 2014, we were contacted and we talked to her, and she decided the swords should come back to Kane, where they belong, she said. So they're technically on loan, but it's more or less like a permanent on loan, and they are here at the depot for anybody to come look at. And if you notice, the scabbard is broken on the end. It's broken off.
So this usually goes the whole way.
Yeah, it would have gone all the way up to the tip. And we thought maybe because of age it had broken off, but that wasn't the case. We found out that a lot of officers broke the scabbard off on purpose, and I noticed you backed up because you knew what I was going to do.
That's a sharp sword, that's all I can say.
Well, when they were in the heat of battle, and they didn't have time to actually draw the sword, they would use it as a bayonet. So that's why it was broken off, so he could just grab the sword and stab whoever was in front of him.
Wow.
So to save his life, but a lot of officers did that. That's why there is no scabbard on the end of that. I see you're still backing up.
I am still backing up. I can't imagine that coming at me. Oh my goodness, that kind of fighting.
So this is his battle sword. I mean, you can look at it and there's dings and nicks, and this was used. This was his used sword.
Yeah, look at that. Definitely was used. I think that's so resourceful the way that they cut the tip off so that they could have more of a use for it. That's pretty handle too.
So this is the epitome of the Civil War for General Kane, and he didn't save a lot of his artifacts, or at least didn't display them. He didn't care to do that. But one of the stories I want to tell you that relates to the sword is his when he went to Gettysburg, the Battle of Gettysburg. And I have some writings from Elizabeth's journal that I want to share too, and it tells about what happened there. And she talks about he had not been feeling well. He had what they call pleurisy, which is a inflammation of the lungs.
And what year would this have been?
1863.
Okay.
This was 1863.
In Gettysburg.
And he was going to get a furlough. Well, not Gettysburg yet, but he was going to get a furlough because of the lung inflammation. And it says, before the furlough reached him, came the Battle of Chancellorsville. He was suffering from an incipient attack of pleurisy, but insisted on heading his brigade. Unfortunately, Clarion, who was his battle horse, rolled over in swimming in the Rappahannock, and Tom was obliged to keep on the wet clothes. There was no time to change. He forced himself to endure his illness until those terrible days were over, and then the surgeon sent him home to die. his pneumonia having set in. So after Chancellorsville, he got pneumonia and they sent him home. They didn't think he was going to survive. And when they brought him to the house in Philadelphia, he was delirious, and for several days he was delirious. He started to get better, and his doctors actually sent him here to Kane to recover because of the air.
The air is very magical here.
So they sent him here, and Elizabeth couldn't come with him because she had the children in Philadelphia, and she couldn't just pack up all the children and come up here. So he was up here for a few weeks anyway. And then he got a telegram from the War Department. Secretary of War Stanton, contacted him and wanted him to come to Washington, D.C. Now, remember, he's still sick. He's recovering, but he's still sick. So he telegraphed Elizabeth to tell her what was going on, and he wanted to meet her in Baltimore. And so she did. She packed up and she went to Baltimore and met him, and she was scared. She was afraid for him. And I'll read a little piece of what she said. When she first got there, she contacted his doctor right away. Then I sent for Dr. Freeman and learned from him. He knew Tom's condition better than anyone else, that he thought Tom unfit for service, but that excitement might enable him to keep the field for a week or even 10 days before sinking. So the adrenaline of whatever mission he had to go on might keep him going for about a week or 10 days before he would sink back into sickness. And then her question was, would his usefulness in commanding his men be worth the cost to his own health, supposing he were not killed in the field? So she's wondering if this is going to kill him, and should she So she told him to go. She said go, because she thought he was worth, what he was going to do. Mm-hmm. So he went to Washington. She went with him. She waited in the carriage, and then he came back out, and he didn't tell her exactly what he was doing. But they traveled back to Baltimore, and that's where they split up. She went home, and his mission was to take the new cipher, which is the code. The rebels had broken the code, so they were able to read all the messages that were coming through to the north. And what he had to do was take a new code to General Meade at Gettysburg. This was after the war had started. So he got there on the second day, so he had to go through enemy lines to get to General Meade. He was dressed in plain clothes. He was in a wagon, and he was driven there because he was sick. He wouldn't have been able to do it himself. And then he spoke French the whole way. So anytime he was stopped by the rebels for any reason, he spoke French, which confused them because they didn't think he would be part of the army if he was speaking French. And I think they just assumed that he was a reporter, because in those days during the Civil War, there was a lot of reporters from different countries covering the war. So he made it through. He made it through the enemy lines and got to General Meade, gave him the new cipher. Then he went to his brigade. His brigade was on Culp's Hill. Culp's Hill was some major fighting, one of the worst fighting in the Gettysburg. So he commanded his brigade by leaning against the ambulance, because he was so sick and so weak that he commanded from leaning against the ambulance and giving orders. It was really tough on him.
What a brave man. He had to travel through enemy lines.
Right.
And he did that by kind of throwing them off by speaking French.
Right.
He gave a new code so that the instructions could be passed safely. And then, as sick as he was, he went up to Gettysburg was it Cobb's Hill?
Culp's Hill.
Culp's Hill.
Culp's Hill.
To find his men and to continue in battle with them.
Right. So she had written this. It said, the rebels had obtained the key to our telegraphic cipher, and Stan gladly entrusted the new one to Tom. He was to go in plain clothes to seek Meade's headquarters in the field, somewhere beyond Westminster, but there was rebel cavalry in Westminster. That somewhere proved to be Gettysburg, and she wrote an exclamation point. I said, I'm glad I did not know what his errand was. If caught, I thought he would have met Andre's fate. Andre was a spy that had been killed.
Oh my gosh.
She was happy she didn't know what he was sent to do.
She learned after the fact.
Right. And then she even writes about when she went back to Philadelphia. Everybody was scared that the rebels were going to come through to Philadelphia. The women were hiding their silver and their silverware, And so,
How
but he
fascinating.
made it through the war, the Gettysburg battle. The one little side story was after the battle, all the dead, all the wounded soldiers, and he looked out there and there was a dead dog out there. And he said that he gave orders for his men to bury the dog, but not the people, because the dog was the only Christian-minded soul on the battlefield. Because the fighting had been so horrific and so bad.
Yeah, it was one of the bloodiest battles there. Gosh, what a brave man that Thomas Kane was.
So,
and Elizabeth, how cool that we have her journals to hear from her.
We have a lot of her journals. Actually, BYU owns the journals, but we have copies of them all, and they're fascinating, and they give us so much history. At the very end of this part of it, she writes, "I am thankful that he was of service, more thankful that he returned unwounded. His Major General's brevet is for gallant and distinguished service at Gettysburg. His resignation was accepted in November 1863, and we passed the winter quietly at Aunt Anne's." So if you're reading about the Civil War and you come across anything about Thomas Kane, you would find him called a Colonel Kane. Because until Gettysburg, until he took that cipher through, he was a colonel. After Gettysburg, he was made a general.
Wow.
So that's why we know him as general, because he came here after the war to start building. So he was general when he came here, but if you read about him, he was a colonel.
That's fascinating.
So,
I just can't get over how much courage he had.
He was little. He was a little man. He was probably 5'3".
Oh wow.
About this big around.
And he was so sick, and he still wanted to go into battle.
He had a will of iron.
Yes, that's a good way to say that. That's awesome, Wendy. What great stories about the connection to different presidents, and then about the battle and some of the stories of General Kane and Gettysburg.
And I skipped over a lot of Elizabeth's journals. It's fascinating what she writes, but there's only so much time, and it gets boring when somebody reads.
Well, if somebody wanted to learn more about what she wrote, could they come up sometime and take a look?
Yes, that's fine. Okay. And we also have his hat there. That's his Civil War hat. If you can see it, that's a precious artifact that we have. That's one of the most important ones here with the swords.
Wow. How special. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. Is there anything else that you wanted to share today?
I don't think so. I think I covered the few things in here. I mean, there's all the trains coming through.
Can't miss that.
There's so many different things in here. I mean, this is just a few of the stories, but there's stories about not just the Kanes. Whenever you talk to me, I'm probably going to tell you a story about Kane, but the Kane family. But there's all kinds of stories around here about different things. I mean, we have the display about the Larson Airport, and we have display about the silverware company that was in Kane, Pennsylvania. But we'll just keep
sharing stories.
We'll keep sharing stories. That's what we do. That's what we love.
That's awesome, Wendy. Well, thank you so much. You're a great storyteller, and I appreciate your time tonight.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone. Hey, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Isn't it really interesting to learn about all of the connections that we have to past presidents? And again, I just can't say it enough. I love hearing the stories about how brave General Kane, our founder, has been, not just when what he did to save the Mormons, but also in the Battle of Gettysburg, and being someone that crossed enemy lines. I just think it's so awesome that we have that legacy as somebody who founded our town, and I think a lot has been built on that today. So I hope it pumps you up as much as it pumps me up, and I always say it, but I'd love to hear the stories that you want to hear about Kane's history. There's some great storytellers here at the depot for the Kane Historic Preservation Society, and it's not just Wednesday nights on here that you can hear these stories. You're welcome to come down here any Wednesday night, as well as on Saturday and Sunday. The doors are open. This Friday is the first of the first Fridays for the fall. So what time, Wendy? 6 to 8 p.m. here at the depot on Friday night. The first Friday of every month for the next couple of months, the depot will be open, and it's a social time and a time to come and check out what's going on here. So please do make it down. We hope to see you there. We hope to see you on the weekends or on a Wednesday night. And in the meantime, we hope to hear what other stories about Kane's history you'd like to hear. So please comment about that. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you again tomorrow for day 77.